I love a good P-51, and there's quite a few in my stash that have been building up now, so it's time to start working my way through them, starting with this, a kit that everybody should own, the Airfix 1/72 scale P-51D Mustang. This was just chucked together as a bit of a mojo build straight out of the box, so what you see is what you get. So join me as I build this. There is no specific unboxing or anything for it. There's plenty of other places that you can go online for that sort of thing, and you'll see all of the bits as I put them together anyway. And don't forget, if you're new here, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you can stay informed about new videos as I release them. According to the information on the side of the box and online, the tooling date is 2016 for this one. It has been released pretty much consistently since then, so there are plenty of options available, different boxings as well. A total of 53 parts, again according to the box, and one decal scheme. And at time of recording, which is March 2025, the recommended retail price is $8.99. It's a Series 1 Airfix kit, so the price will adapt and evolve as prices do. So yes, Series 1, about as cheap as you're going to get from Airfix that isn't a vintage classic. Construction begins as is traditional with the interior. We have this one long floor piece and an instrument panel that gets glued in here. This is a flat instrument panel with a decal that will be added later. And then we have the control column, which every single time I've made this kit, because this is not the first, that has broken. It is incredibly flimsy and it is joined to one of these sprues halfway down, so it doesn't take much. This one broke as I removed it. Others have actually broken in transit, but kind of expect that this is going to break, and I've very carefully tried to glue it back on, although spoilers, at some point between now and the kit being finished, it disappears again. No idea when it broke, it just did. The pilot seat is then glued in place. There is a pilot supplied with this kit, although I chose not to include him on this occasion. There is also whatever the air filter radiator thing, it's a radiator, isn't it? Underneath you've got the back of that, and the entire thing can then be dry fit on the side. Maybe worth noting that this is an older Airfix release, so it has the paler grey plastic. I don't know if the parts are as fragile with the newer grey plastic because I don't have one yet. And you might just be able to tell from this angle that there is a small amount of warping on the fuselage, so everything is just dry fit to make sure it lines up nicely. And yes, it did splay out slightly. Nothing really to worry about, nice and easy, didn't need heating or anything, it was just resolved with glue. Right, here we have the spinner propeller assembly. That long pin shouldn't be there, that is clearly some residual plastic from the moulding process. The pin is on the base of the propellers, as you see there. This spinner then goes on top, so that's why I removed that. And this has to be glued in place, or not glued in place, but placed when the fuselage halves go together. Before then, though, we of course need to paint the interior, so I am spraying this Attacker Blue Line interior green. It's blue line, so it's designed for brush painting, however you can just thin it down. I've got a bit of Attacker thinner that I use, and it goes through the airbrush, usually with no real problems, as long as you thin properly. I didn't choose to prime, the only reason is laziness. It's the inside of a plane, I don't care as much, so it's just slapping the green anywhere where there should be green. The decal for the instrument panel can then be placed. You'll notice that I've picked out some bits in black as per the instructions. This decal was placed on a gloss surface. I always just put a little bit of gloss varnish on there just to make it go on a little bit easier, but yeah, no problems with this at all. It's perfectly well shaped. And then my usual wash technique of this contrast paint from Citadel Colours. This is just an extremely dark grey, thinned down with some water. I'm testing it there on a little bit of the plane that won't be visible, and then just brushing it on just to give a little bit of texture, a little bit of shadow, and to dull down that rather bright interior green. And this is always what I use as the last interior step, so if I do any chipping or anything, or just a bit of dry brushing and some silver, then this will be afterwards, but no such thing here. The paint has gone over the line slightly, so just to get better bondage of the cement, just scrape the paint away like that, and then the fuselage halves can be glued together. So interior piece all in here, which covers the rear wheel well, the propeller blades, as I said, the whole spinner assembly has to go in now, so you get the little pin. And as long as you do this correctly and don't put glue anywhere that it shouldn't be, then it will fit nicely. You can see here what I mean about the warping. It's not great. This one at least is not one of the worst I've had from Airfix. They are a bit prone to this on some of their Series 1 kits. This one just required glue. As long as you know where to glue first. So I glued where the actual interior piece is, and then the tail, and then I left the front until the back end had dried, because it's the front which has the warping, and then just added a bit of glue, obviously avoiding that area where the propeller blade assembly is going to be, and then the whole thing can be clamped and taped as necessary to try and keep it straight as it dries. The other option I alluded to with some warping is to heat up the plastic a little bit. That's generally not necessary, but I would be, as in with this kit, it's necessary on some, but not with this. But I would be intrigued to see if there's any warping on the newer plastic, so please let me know in the comments below if you've got the newer release of this and it has the same warping problem. Thankfully, the worst one that I had, I think, was the Focke-Wulf 190, and that was also fairly simple to resolve. But this one, it just required the glue. It was only warped in one slight direction, so all good. Anyway, with the propeller blades in, it doesn't spin particularly freely, but with them in and the glue in the correct places only, you can then glue this little intake bit on. And this is the bit where you're most likely to glue the hub assembly to the fuselage. It's not actually sticking the hub assembly in. It's now when you, the kit instructions ask you, or instruct you, to go and put glue extremely close to that hub assembly. Onto the wings, which is, well, nice and simple. You've got some detail for the wheel wells on the top half of the wing, and that just fits in nicely once you glue that together. And then the wings can be glued onto the fuselage, which again just slides very nicely together. The fit in this kit, absolutely fine, although just to get that wing nice and neatly, it did require a little bit of pressure just on that join there in front of the undercarriage bay. Just a little bit of tape required to keep that nice and tight. And then we're on to the final assembly, and we have a bit of flash here on the intake underneath the wing in a really awkward place. Just kind of had to slice it open with a knife. It's the only bit of actual flash I found on the kit, and it's just in obviously the worst, most annoying location. Anyway, right, control surfaces, you get replacements for having them down. In this case, I'm keeping them up. I have made this before with the flaps down, so this time I was doing it up, but I'm aware that we are getting close to the painting stage, and I wanted to just cover that off with a bit more detail than I'm likely to get. Firstly, note that I am not gluing the horizontal stabilizers on. The entire rear wing assembly is not on. So I have this Vallejo Model Air Red RLM23 ROT, just a bog standard red. The whole aircraft has been primed in white, and then the red is the first colour to go on. This red is lovely, but it isn't very opaque, so it doesn't cover very well over other colours, as in unintended colours or a mix of colours. So I want it nice and bright, so therefore I've gone for white. I understand that yellow primer would also work to get it nice and bright, but in this case, white is what I know, white is what I have, white is what I used. The spinner assembly is also painted red, as is a sort of strip around the nose, and the horizontal stabilizers are now painted and the horizontal stabilizers were painted as well. I found it easier to paint these detached. They will be glued on later, don't worry, but for me it just made more sense to paint them this way rather than once they had been attached. Next we're moving on to the yellow, which is just this Vallejo Model Air medium yellow, and this is to paint the stripes that wrap around the wings, both top and bottom. There are actually decals supplied to cover these stripes, and they also have separate yellow bits for the undercarriage legs. I chose to paint them, however. Next, we have taped everything off and we're getting out the glossy black. One of the reasons why, in fact the main reason why I chose to paint the yellow, is that they are almost exactly the correct width for the Tamiya tape that I tend to use, meaning one strip of tape, nice and easy, and it just wraps around with no real fuss or measuring, as long as they are symmetrical. So in this case I lined it up with just one of the panel lines, made sure that the other half was exactly the same, and you also can see that the red has been taped off as well, and this is why I didn't want to attach the rear wing. On to the main body colour, which is this Hataka aluminium, or aluminum if you are that way inclined. I had heard that having a bare metal finish is best when you have a gloss black underneath. This is actually the first time I was trying that for myself. I didn't really put any finesse or skill into this. It was just a glossy black paint and then some silver. And now we have the olive drab, again Hataka. Once again, of course, all of these paints had been thinned with some Hataka thinner. But here we have the olive drab anti-glare panel on the front. And we can then remove all of that tape and pat myself on the back for doing such a jolly good job. The only bit of masking which didn't quite work out as I intended was around the tail. It's obviously much easier to tape it first and then glue the tail together. Had I tried to tape around it, it would have been a pain, but it's a tiny bit wonky, needed a tiny bit of tidying up. But honestly, that seemed like the more logical option rather than trying to tape around wings. Oh, awful. But the yellow here, as you can see, absolutely fantastic. No bleed, it doesn't look thin or anything, and I didn't have to waste time with a decal. So yes, I would much rather paint it than waste time with decals unnecessarily. Speaking of which, it is of course now the decaling stage, so the entire aircraft has been gloss varnished just with some Vallejo. I don't usually show it just because it's a clear liquid being sprayed, so it's a bit irrelevant. But anyway, the decals can now go on, starting with the insignia. In fact, I started with the fuselage in general. I tend to start from one end, work my way around, usually the fuselage, and then go onto the wings from there. And there was no setting solution required for any of these. They're Cartograph decals. They are absolutely fantastic, just good quality, and there's not a massive number of them either, so all in all, quite an easy job. We're now getting to the final assembly. There is this tiny, horrible little landing light that goes inside, and it has to be at a slight angle. I obviously kept it out because I was painting around, and I didn't want to paint over it. But yes, absolutely tiny, awkward, and I don't think I've even noticed it since it's been sitting on my shelf, but never mind. Also worth noting, I was going to say mentioning then, and it's about to turn into moating, and I realised it might be a word. Is it building a moat? Anyway, I've gone off track. Help! Worth mentioning that I have satin varnished the entire aircraft as well. I do later go over the anti-glare panel. I'm losing all my words. Anti-glare panel with some matte varnish, just with a brush, but I did satin varnish the entire thing. I feel that that's the best way of decorating a polished aluminium aircraft. I know I usually use matte, so just thought I'd worth mentioning it again. Just bog standard Vallejo stuff. And all of that rambling has detracted from me painting the canopy. Just glued on, it's a clear piece on top of a plastic piece, which is a little bit stressful, and then just painted with a small brush. I tend to find that it's easier for me to hand paint canopies than it is to mask. I hate masking, I don't mind small paintwork, so that's why I do it this way. And finally, we have the undercarriage in its various forms. So we have these undercarriage doors. They were painted red off camera at the same time as everything else was. Oh yes, you may have also noticed that the shape around the nose has changed slightly. That's just using the decal. Anyway, you got red undercarriage doors, and then you've got yellow stripes, and I used the decals for this bit. So you can see on the main leg here it is red. Well, by the end they just miraculously have yellow stripes on them. They are the decals, I just didn't film them. But it's a bit spindly, they're a little bit fragile, but I've never had a problem with any of them breaking, so they do the job. They're at least fit for purpose that way. And then very carefully glued in, and we can have a look at the end result. This is very much a kit that you can just chuck together in a weekend. There are a few things that I do just want to highlight. Firstly, I disagree with the instructions on a couple of matters. The wheel well, for example, it instructs you to paint them green. I don't think this is correct. Now, by no means am I an expert on the subject, but logic would denote that it would either be bare aluminium or possibly zinc chromate. Based on the photos that I've got from the war, they tend to look the same as everything else, as in they tend to look bare aluminium. There'd be no logical reason in wasting interior green paint on a wheel well, basically. I've been tempted to do a video on it before, but sometimes logic just denotes no. I believe it comes from some preserved ones which are green and are therefore being copied incorrectly. That's if anyone's got any better information, then by all means send me a link towards it. But from the images that I've got from Second World War books, they were bare aluminium. I've already covered off the fragility of some of the parts, so yes, the undercarriage is a bit spindly, but so far I've never broken it, and of course you can actually see the radio antenna mast. Exactly the same thing happened there, and it is just a mere stump. So yeah, it's all very well designing kits that have very small parts, but if you can't produce them without them breaking, probably should just make them a little bit thicker. But otherwise the detail is absolutely fine. The panel lines are not too thick. They appear to be more or less in the right shape. There's not too few of them. It's about right. It's about as standard as you're going to get for an Airfix kit of this era. Genuinely a very, very enjoyable build. I like the Mustang, and I like having Mustangs in my collection, and this is a good one. I do have other Mustangs in my stash, as I mentioned at the beginning, and some of them will be making an appearance soon because I've already made another one. So we're going to have a little Mustang shootout for the next year or so, just obviously not exclusively. There will be other planes, but let me know if there's any Mustangs that you think I should buy. 1/72nd scale is the only rule at the moment, and we'll see. Maybe you're right, maybe I've already got one, maybe it's one that I'm going to have to go out and buy. Either way, this is a solid starting point for anyone that would like a model of a P-51D Mustang in 1/72nd scale. If for whatever reason you'd like this model but you don't have one, well, there's an affiliate link down below, not to this exact release because they no longer stock it, but to something similar that you can at least get excited over. I would like to thank you for watching this far. Don't forget, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you are interested in such things, and you could even become a channel member like these people on screen. Now, they've known about this Mustang for ages. I shared images of it way back in, I think it was autumn last year, so if you want to have sneaky spoilers that you can then forget about and then go, oh yeah, that's a thing that I vaguely remember happened, then you could look at becoming a member along with them. In the meantime, though, I'm off to go and probably build another Mustang, and, well, thanks for watching, and have a happy P-51D existence.